you start with the language of the business, I feel like that is how you truly earn a seat at the table. I tell my team, we're not here to deliver training, we're here to spark growth. But unless we define what does a culture of learning mean at our company first, I think that the tech will not be as successful as what it could be.
In large enterprises, it's easy to become distracted by the next platform or pin your hopes on AI. But the truth is, without a clear foundation, even the best tools fall short. But when you root learning in the language of the business, that's when you stop ticking boxes and how you start to shape a high-performing team that drives real impact. I'm joined by Charles Donnell, Global Senior Director for Learning Innovation, Experience, and Strategy at the Coca-Cola Company. And today we'll be diving into how to move beyond trends and tools and instead craft strategies that transform people and build more capability in them. In Charles's words, this is how you create an environment of enablement that can truly shift the narrative of the business. Charles, welcome. It's a pleasure to have you here. I know you and I have had some great conversations, and I've been dying to have you on here to talk to you more formally. So welcome, and I'm curious to just learn more about your insights. And of course, running a high-performing brand and running a high-performing org like yours comes down to people enablement, comes down to how you get your team moving, how you build capability. And so I know in the conversations you and I have had, we're always kind of talking about upending how learning teams think and talk and act. And I guess my first question and our starting point is just really, how have you, and I know it's been quite a personal journey for you, how have you and your team really helped shift the narrative of what a learning team is capable of inside a large enterprise like the Coca-Cola Company?
You know, I'm generally quite an excited person when it comes to work. I love the field that I'm in, but I really think it's an exciting time for the learning and development industry, not just because of technical changes, but just because of the emphasis and the power that we have to really shift the narrative of the business. But we have a really strong legacy of building our employees and offering our employees learning, leadership, and growth opportunities. And so when I joined the company, I inherited a really creative team, a world-class content creation team, and that's really still a strength of ours. But as we know, in the learning and development industry and landscape right now, content is in abundance, and there's a lot of content out there, and we're hearing from our employees, we're hearing in the industry that employees are overloaded and people are overloaded just generally. And so the content creation, learning and development strategy has changed a lot. And we're really thinking now about like the right learning at the right time. And so we as a team, we've evolved over the past year from being producers of excellent content to being strategic business partners. And so we're really focused on shaping solutions that drive business performance and challenging that, learning is a workshop or learning is an e-learning mindset, and helping the business and people that we work with within capabilities and within our functions to really think differently about learning and development. And so we're keeping our creative strength, but we're channeling them now into the solutions. And we want these solutions to be more lean. We want them to be measurable and really driving business performance. Because at the end of the day, what the business wants to do is to drive performance. And what we're doing is making sure that our learning interventions close skill gaps and help our employees be better at our jobs. And so we're finding that the business is liking what we're doing in that regard.
I'd love to know, how do you pivot from creation center, a content-driven, output-driven, mandate focus, and almost expectation towards, to your point, almost acting like a consultant and being a challenger?
Yes, I would say I often, when I'm changing the narrative or I'm coming into a company and shifting the strategy, I like to put my facilitator hat on and ask like a powerful question, and ask, what learning experience, think about learning throughout your career. What experience impacted you the most, or what do you remember the most? And when you ask anybody that question, but particularly leaders, they instantly go, I had a great manager, or, I had a great assignment, or I moved abroad for a job. They don't say, oh, it was this really great e-learning, or it was this really great classroom course that they went to. Maybe, but it's very rare for them to give you that answer. I also like to ask business-oriented questions. Like, I don't go in with, what training do you need, or what learning solution, or what LMS would be good for you. I ask questions like, what's the challenge? What outcome do you need to see? What problem are you trying to solve? And when you ask those questions, you get a very different answer to, how long does the course need to be? How long does the training need to be? And so I think asking some interesting questions, it's a little bit trickier as a learning development professional because sometimes you don't get the answer that you think you're going to get, but it enables you to really get under the cover of helping the business and the business leaders and helping you understand what some of the things that they're experiencing every day and where you can really play a role. And it's also, I think, being comfortable with not knowing the answer immediately and just being able to have a conversation. I think sometimes, any professional, but if, somebody who's been in this field my entire career, I think sometimes we feel like we need to know the answer immediately, but it's really okay. And I empower my team to say, look, you've given us some great insights, but we're going to go away and we're going to brainstorm and we're going to work together on what a potential solution could look like based on the problems you're trying to solve and not give you an answer straight away. I think it's about asking questions and being comfortable with saying, this is great, we're going to come back with something later. And we're also going to involve you in that solution design. We're not going to go and do this on our own. We want your insights. We want your employees' insights. So I think powerful questions are really key. And I also would say we're on a journey to doing this, but we earn influence through showing how what we've done has actually impacted the business. So getting the data and showing, okay, this has been the measurable behavior change by doing X activity. And this is how now we're seeing this in your employees day to day. So showing leaders like tangible ROI and human impact, not just happy sheets of people who attended courses or classes, which is good, but actually showing them, before the program, your employees were here, and after the program or after the initiative, after the experience, they're here, and actually showing them that data of how things have changed. And I think that's how we truly earn a seat at the table. I think we're still in a realm of it's very tricky to measure learning impact because humans are so complex. But if you start with the language of the business, I feel like that is how you truly earn a seat at the table.
How do you get that balance right of allowing your team the space to do proper human-centered design while still trying to move at the pace of the business?
It's a mindset, again, in that you pick your battles. You find the areas of the business that you feel like want to experiment. Of course, we sit within the people and culture team. We have a role to enable the business and enable our leaders to do the work that they want to do. I think if you go into that meeting with this is one way that we could look at this, the traditional way, and this is the future-leaning, forward-thinking way that might take a little bit more time, but the behavior change, the long-lasting impact will be stronger, and kind of show them the side-by-side. Most of the time, I think the leader will pick the longer-term solution that will drive the business impact rather than the tick box activity. So I think it's about how you, again, craft the narrative of what we could do in the next month versus what if we spent a little bit longer, truly defining the solution, creating something that is actually truly impactful, what the business could see differently by doing this. So I think it's about giving leaders the opportunity to see the different paths. And then when you have some of those success stories, taking them to those leaders that maybe are a little bit more living in, the more traditional learning days and saying, look how this could be different for you. So I think it's taking baby steps, it's picking your battles and giving the business what they need. But again, putting that consulting mindset on and showing what other options look like for them.
What are the habits of a team that is focused on business performance? What do you feel you do differently or it's differentiated?
In order for us to be successful and us to provide value to the business, we have to understand the business. We have to understand how we're making money. We have to listen to earnings calls. We have to listen to investor relations calls and hear what the CEO is saying, what the CFO is saying, what key business players are saying about business performance, about where we're going as an organization, and tie everything back to what we're doing, to what those leaders are saying and what we're hearing in earnings calls, in investor relations calls. So I think it's always been instilled in me as somebody who sits within the people and culture function, is that my job in L&D contributes directly to the success of the business. And I think that's just always been something that I have thought about. And so I always ensure that my team has time to attend company town halls. I always ensure that we discuss things like investor relations, earning call on our regular team meetings. And we're constantly looking at the new trends in the industry as well. So not just looking at the Coca-Cola Company, but we're looking externally as well. And so our job is to bring those trends into business leaders. And I think sometimes, we hear about the L&D trends, but, business leaders aren't focused on the L&D trends. So it's our job to ensure that they're aware of those trends and they're aware of those things that are happening in industry so that they can, supply us with the investment to do better learning. So I think it goes back to the mindset, and it goes back to seeing yourself as an integral member of the company that is contributing to business value.
I love the connection between learning trends and your earnings call to a certain degree. Like it's not a connection I really ever made, because oftentimes I'm used to going to conferences and trade shows where it's all about prettier e-learning this or faster LMS that. And how do you view the idea when you go out to the world looking for trends and sort of grounded in what your business is trying to accomplish? What's the lens you look at in terms of L&D trends?
I think it's very easy for us to be bombarded with the newest technology or the newest learning trend and maybe even learning fad. And we think, we have to do this. But I think going back to what we were talking about earlier about the learning design principles, we set a strategy and we find the partner or the trend or the technology that aligns with that strategy. We don't try and fit a trend to connect to our strategy. So it's like, we set the strategy for the company, we know the direction, we listen to the trends within the business and our earnings call and what we hear internally. But we also stay connected to what's happening externally and ensure that the solutions that we're bringing in externally solve the problem. So I think I've seen learning professionals fall into the trap of, this really cool new LMS will solve every problem. But I think you have to start with the strategy and then find the partner that can align with that strategy, not the other way around.
And how do you go about letting your strategy lead the way? Because I know I often have conversations with business leaders that have no choice but to follow the tech or to follow the trends because they aren't necessarily strategically entrenched in the way that you potentially and your team would be in order to do it. How do you arrive on the strategy that makes sense for the business? Who do you involve? Who are your partners? What are the questions you're asking to inform your strategy?
Another strength of the Coca-Cola Company is our focus on capabilities. So I would sit within the Learning and Development Center of Excellence, but we also have capability leaders within our functions. And so my team and I, we set the strategy and we roll out content and experiences for the company. And so those are enterprise-wide that the company has determined are all employees have some kind of need or skill need for that solution experience, what it ends up being. But then we also have, as I mentioned, capability leaders within functions. That might be finance, that might be technical innovation, supply chain, who have the finger on the pulse of that function. And so we work very closely with them to understand, what are some of the things they're seeing, hearing, feeling about learning, about, anything going on from a learning or capability perspective. And we regularly have conversations with them. And that might be through we have a regular monthly meeting with them. We also interview them regularly. And so we have our own perspective from a CEO, but we also make sure that it's linked to the functions. And then the drill down from that is we, particularly as we've shifted in the last year, we're talking to employees more. We want to involve employees not only in the initial strategy, but in the design and in the prototyping so that we can really see, are they responding to it how we thought? How could we adapt the strategy or adapt the design of the program to be more reflective of their everyday? And so I think not only do we, do our own strategy development from what we're seeing from the business, but also what we're seeing from the industry. We then do a drill down to capability leaders to see what we're seeing at the functions. And then, of course, involving employees in the design, in the output of anything that we create. So it does take longer than probably other companies because there's many people that have a say, but we're finding with these enterprise-wide solutions, for example, right now we're working on storytelling, that the end outcome is that we have more agreement and we have more buy-in to the solution. But then at the end of the day, the solution actually drives what we intended to drive. So a lot of conversations, a lot of interviews, a lot of outreach. But it's a lot easier now than what it was 5 years ago because we have things like Copilot and ChatGPT to synthesize our insights, which is super awesome. And I think using these tools to not only help us be more efficient, but help us save time on things that maybe would have taken us a long time ago is another area that I'm constantly talking to my team about.
You beat me to where I was going with the question when you started talking about all the different conversations you've been having, because that sounds wonderful. And my mind instantly went to, and how do you find the time for this? But it actually, I was actually just on a call right now talking to a stakeholder about the time we want to spend on things versus the time we have to spend on things. And there's so much about being more of a strategic partner and having proactive conversations with the business that clearly seems to be best practice for you and your team there. For a lot of people that you can't have those questions because you simply don't have the time or the energy or the influence in order to do that. And I think there's, a direct correlation there to ways in which AI can help free up that space. And I'd love to know a bit more about, AI has influenced every inch of every organization. How is it shaping what your team does and doesn't do? And how are you using it to add value to the business?
Yes. So I first of all say I also had a very recent conversation about saving room to just think. Often we just generally, as anybody, any profession, we think work is doing, writing emails or creating documents. But I think in strategy roles, which both of us are in, we have to give ourselves room to just think, to reflect, to read. And I think work gets away and we just find ourselves doing busybody work. But if we don't allow ourselves time to think, that's when we start to honestly lose the pulse on the business. And so being intentional about saving the time for strategy, for conversations. And, sometimes a few weeks can go by and I'm like, I haven't spoken or had a one-on-one with somebody at a function or somebody in the business. And I feel like I'm losing something from that. And so I think being intentional about finding the time for strategy is really important. And then just more generally, we're also thinking about how do we create an AI-powered learning ecosystem as a future strategy. We think there's a lot of opportunity. There's a lot of new players out there when it comes to artificial intelligence. And so we're taking the time to understand what would an AI-powered learning ecosystem look like for the Coca-Cola Company? What would it change? What would it enhance? And what do we need to have in place in order to help it be successful and help our employees learn and understand that this is a support for them in their career and their growth as well. Because time is of essence, if I have a bold or what I think is a bold idea anyway, or a great idea, like I'll kind of ask ChatGPT, is this a great idea? I do find that sometimes ChatGPT tells me is, even though it isn't.
I was going to say it, and it probably says that's one of the best ideas you've ever had, Charles.
Exactly, and so it loves me, which I also love from my personality. But at the same time, I think it's a really good individual, and I'll call it individual, like a good source to bounce ideas off, and really just to kind of get thought starters. I think the power of artificial intelligence is to not only to be that kind of thought partner and that kind of sidekick in many respects, but to take away some of the busybody work. But I'd also say that it's helping us get ready for conversations with leaders. So I think one of the things that we were talking about before about going to business leaders with that consulting mindset, again, it can help you prepare a list of questions, or it can even simulate, pushback to a suggestion that you have. So I think for us, it enables that. And then we're then taking those ways of learning for ourselves and integrating them into the solutions that we're creating for our employees. So we have, our internal LLM that we've created our own personas within. We have one for change management, for example. We're thinking about doing one for storytelling. So helping learners get the personalized learning at the time of need.
So much we think about when it comes to AI is about taking our current tasks and either eliminating them or creating them or doing more efficiency. But the way you were talking was almost kind of stretching boundaries of like, it could do work you didn't even think was work that you wanted to do. So sort of like sending like speaker notes or like, guides. Like, I love that concept of like, you're about to head into this room with this individual and you need to pitch this concept and I'm not going to be there, and you need to maybe be a full learning expert for a day. Here's how you need to do it, and here's a way to kind of give you some speaking notes. So that's really great.
Yeah, even just giving you, the confidence to walk into that room with being able to be prepared with what some of those pushback questions might be. I think that in itself is superb, but also, again, just being prepared for more difficult stakeholders and using these LLMs and telling them, this stakeholder often responds like X when we push back on training requests. So how can we help them think differently? And then that also then trains the LLM to understand the type of stakeholders that you're dealing with. So from a personal productivity perspective, it's fantastic. But then also, again, on the other flip side of our actual day job, from a learning personalization, it's also incredibly exciting on what we can do.
You did mention something that really resonated with me, certainly off the back of the AI conversation we were having. But you said, our job is to spark growth. Our job is to create ideas. I reflect a lot about, what is the role of a learning practitioner in enabling people and how that feels like a more human task than ever.
Yeah, I would say along the lines of this question, initially when AI came out and learning platforms and providers, there were AI native platforms coming out, and then there were traditional learning technologies that were adding AI. I think the focus was on the technology, but I think in the future it's more the learning culture that is important for us, and like how we're helping people understand that like learning happens everywhere. And I think that AI can help with that. I think what we want to enable is for people to have better conversations. What we want to enable is for people to be more prepared going into, discussions with leaders. I think one great example is we're using an AI coaching agent in the company, and it's enabling people to have better coaching conversations with their employees. So I think it's about using the technology, building on some of the things I was sharing previously to help people be better humans in many respects and be better prepared and be able to influence more effectively and successfully. It's giving people the tools to be able to tell better stories, to be able to influence more effectively, and have practice environments to doing that. And so I think that's how we're thinking about it. And we're also thinking about it as like, we're not going in with the tech first, we're going in with what's the culture that we're trying to create and how can the technology enable that culture. So I think sometimes, like I've been talking about before, we can go in and think, this technology can solve everything. Maybe AI can solve everything. But unless we define what does a culture of learning mean at our company first, I think that the tech will not be as successful as what it could be.
I think it's quite a beautiful way to think about your AI strategy, by starting with the question, what is the learning culture we believe in? And then asking, and how can AI help us enable that? It
Yes.
feels at first like it feels almost like a contradiction at times.
Yeah.
But it actually, especially when you talk about realms like stakeholder influencing or personalization, all of a sudden you're getting to that place of a culture that you couldn't remotely achieve without sort of the scale or sophistication of AI. So I think it's a really nice way of putting it. I don't necessarily associate AI and culture together. That's a good way of thinking of it.
I think it breaks down barriers for people as well. I not that this is really anything at Coca-Cola, most of our learning offerings are open to everybody, but I think that the power and the value of AI is that everybody has this kind of learning co-pilot, learning partner that can support them. And I think the shift that we're trying to make is that learning happens over here in a room or in it's episodic to, anybody can learn at any time. And I think that for me is the power of artificial intelligence, is that you have this support ongoing that learns with you, that can recommend experiences for you, that isn't just about pieces of content. So personalization, I think, is going to really help with fairness, honestly, and helping people get the right experiences for them and the different types of style that people have when it comes to learning or experiences. So that's kind of how I'm thinking about it. And that's why we are spending the time now to define what a true learning culture looks like. We have a great foundation, but we're now shifting it to the future based on these enhancements and also based on where the world is now.
Before we leave, as you know, we do like to ask one question, and it's an important question I find, certainly for myself. What does unforgettable learning mean to you?
For me, unforgettable learning is about emotion. I reflect back to what I was on a leadership development program early in my career, and that's also helped shape my perspective on learning, because I didn't just learn in a classroom. I didn't just learn by reading a textbook. I was able to move to different countries. I was able to experience different cultures. I was able to experience different parts of the business live. And to me, that was unforgettable learning. And I have such positive emotions. I also have negative emotions where I was like, oh my gosh, but that was what made it unforgettable. And so that I take with me into everything that I design, that experience and those emotions, whether they're positive or whether they were negative.
There's something really powerful about the unexpected power of feeling something at work.
Mm-hmm.
You know, we expect feelings outside of work all the time. You know, our relationships, our dog, or, you know, like there's a lot of places where we can get feelings positively and negatively, but we don't actively look for it at work. And so it's transformative when it shows up, and emotion is definitely a word I resonate with. And I think, you know, as two people who are also facilitators, you know, you look for that moment of emotion. You know, you've hit that bar. You know, you've done the thing that you need to do, and you've reached people on an emotional level. You got people feeling something. You know, so
I could not agree more. I love it when people cry in a classroom, obviously for good tears, but it's always a moment
when I make people cry.
Yeah, of course. No, but I couldn't agree more that is when I facilitate and I leave and I've seen that emotion come through, I know I've done a good job, and I know that that gives me energy as well. So
Charles, thank you so much for your time. It was a pleasure to have you, and can't wait to have you on again.
Yeah, thank you so much, Josh.
Thanks for tuning in. If you haven't already, join our subscriber list to be the first to receive new episodes of the Unforgettable Learning Podcast and all the other goodies we've got lined up for you.